So this is a very interesting book that I first discovered some years ago now. I think it may very well be one of the oldest um, works of literature on the planet, and that's, of course, one of the major reasons why I am intrigued and interested in it. This particular book is from it, on Wikipedia. It says it was published before the year 1021. So that means that right now, as I am going to read you a short chapter from it, and by the way, it's an enormous book, but that means that right now in 2022, in March, as I am going to read this, as I say, the book would be precisely 1001 years old. The plot in the book is mostly just about this character Genji, kind of just wandering around. He's very wealthy, and he lives, of course, in Asia, and he lives the life of a rich noble, and I think he was just like considered very good looking or something, and mostly the book is about his liaisons with women. I've never read this book straight through. I just sort of flip it open sometimes and I read a random chapter or two. There's no sin in that because it's such a long text, but it's such I would consider it vital reading due to its age for anyone who is interested in the history of literature. So let's get started. This chapter is called The Barrier Gate. It's one of the shortest, which is why I chose it to make this audio for you. Here we go. During the year following the death of Genji's father, the man who had been vice-governor of Iyo was appointed vice-governor of Hitachi. The old man had to leave the capital to assume his post, and his young wife, the woman Genji thought of as his lady of the molted cicada shell, had no choice but to accompany him. While living in that distant province, she learned of Genji's exile to Suma, and though she continued to yearn for him in secret, she had no intermediary who could carry a letter to him. The winds of gossip that blew across the peak of Mount Tsukuba struck her as baseless, unreliable, and so the years passed with no correspondence at all between them. Though the term of his exile had not been set, Genji did eventually go back to the capital. The year after his return, the vice-governor of Hitachi, having finished his 4-year term of service, also moved back. By coincidence, on the very day the vice-governor was scheduled to reach the barrier gate at Osaka Pass, on his way home, Genji was setting out on a pilgrimage to Ishiyama Temple, near the southern end of Lake Biwa. The sons of the vice-governor, including the former governor of Ki Province, had come out from the city to greet their father's party, and they informed him that Genji's procession would be heading to Ishiyama. The vice-governor, he knew that the road would be congested with people and carriages if the parties were to meet up, so he decided to set off quickly at dawn. Unfortunately, his party included many women's carriages, and as they lumbered along slowly, the sun rose high in the sky. When they reached the beach at Uchide, on the southern shore of Lake Biwa, outrunners from Genji's procession came crowding in, filling up the road, so that the vice-governor's party scarcely had space to cede the right-of-way. Our Lord's procession has already crossed the eastern edge of the capitale at Mount Owata, the outrunners announced. Upon hearing this, the members of the vice-governor's party dismounted. They pulled their carriages up the slope just below the barrier gate. Withdrawing to various spots beneath the cedar trees there, they unhitched the oxen, set the carriage shafts down discreetly in the shade of the trees, and respectfully made way for Genji's procession to pass. Although the vice-governor's party was strung out along the way, some carriages trailing behind, others out ahead, it was still impressive looking. The colorful hems of the ladies' sleeves and trousers draping out from beneath the blinds on 10 or so of the carriages were splendidly refined, not at all provincial looking, and put Genji in mind of the carriages of spectators who came out to view a procession on some splendid occasion, such as the journey of the high priestess to the Isi shrine. Genji's men, too many to count, all fixed their eyes on these women's carriages, even though they themselves were part of the magnificent procession of a lord whose fortunes were prospering. It was the end of the 9th month. The autumn foliage was a blaze of colors. Clumps of grass withered by the frost, some darker in hue, some lighter, stretched out delightfully all around as far as the eye could see. As the men in Genji's retinue came streaming down through the barrier gate, they cut attractive figures in the harmonious embroidery and dappled cloth of their colorful hunting robes. Genji lowered the blind on his carriage, and he summoned the younger brother of his lady of the molted Chikata shell. He had once served as Genji's page, and was now an assistant commander in the right gate guard. Genji gave him the following message to deliver to his sister. Can you ignore the fact that I came to meet you at the barrier gate today? He recalled many sad, poignant things that had happened between them. But because he had to be mindful of prying eyes, his message was rather trite, and would likely come to nothing. For her part, the lady had never forgotten those events of long ago, which she had kept to herself, and as memories flooded back to her, she grew melancholy. Both times I passed this gate, going out, coming back, I could not stop my tears. Will he mistake them now for the clear spring that flows forever on this slope? She was certain that he would never understand her feelings, that it was all for naught. A few days later, the lady's younger brother went out to meet Genji, who was heading back from Ishiyama. The young man apologized for having continued on with his sister's party instead of joining Genji's retinue that day at the barrier gate. Many years ago, when he was a page, he had been a favorite of Genji, who supported and protected him until he was promoted to the 5th rank. But then, at the time of Genji's unexpected troubles, the young man chose to accompany his sister to Hitachi, fearful of gossip that might implicate him. Genji considered his action disloyal, and the two men grew distant over the intervening years. though Genji never openly let it be known how he felt. Indeed, he continued to count the young man among his closest retainers, though they were certainly not as intimate as they had once been. The man who was governor of Ki when Genji began his unsuccessful courtship of the lady of the molted Chikata shell was now governor of the province of Kawachi. His younger brother was none other than the lesser captain of the Right Imperial Guard, the young man who had gone into exile with Genji after being stripped of his post. As a reward for his act of loyalty, the lesser captain had been promoted to chamberlain, serving in the Right Gate Guard, and Genji now treated him with special favor. Courtiers who observed his success regretted their own behavior at the time. They wondered ruefully how they could ever have allowed gossip and innuendo to sway them. Be that as it may, Genji summoned the lady's younger brother again, gave him a letter to deliver. The brother was amazed to find that after all these years, there was still a place in Genji's heart for an affair he should have forgotten long ago. The other day, Genji had written, I realized that the bond between us is strong, but I wonder if you realize it as well. Though we passed by chance on the road to Omi, a name that promised us a tryst at Lake Biwa, in vain I searched for you beside its fresh waters. How I resent that guard at the barrier gate, he concluded his letter, so damnably officious. As he handed the letter over, he added, It's been so many years since I last contacted your sister. I feel like a shy youth starting an affair. Still, she has always been in my heart, and so I tend to feel as if it all just happened yesterday. Will she detest me all the more for being so amorous? The young man showed great deference on receiving the letter and took it to his sister. You must send a reply, he told her. I was convinced that he was estranged from me, but to my amazement he's as warm and kind as in the old days. You may find such distractions needless, but you cannot refuse to reply just because it violates your moral sensibilities. You are a woman, after all, so it will hardly be considered an unpardonable sin if you give in to your feelings and send him a letter. She was now even more shy and diffident than she had ever been. But perhaps because a letter from Genji was so rare and so precious, she couldn't resist replying. What is this place, Osaka Barrier Gate? Its name promises a meeting, yet to reach it, one must cut through overgrown thickets of sorrow. This is all like a dream. Genji had found it impossible to forget the regrets and the bitterness of his affair with this woman, and he would disturb and disconcert her heart by sending letters on various occasions. In the meantime, her husband, the former vice-governor of Hitachi, was suffering from infirmities, likely caused by the ravages of old age. Feeling anxious and depressed, he gave final instructions to his sons concerning his young wife. Please, just let her do as her heart desires. He told them this repeatedly just before his death. And serve her just as I did during my lifetime. The old man had seen how tormented his young wife had been, how she had lamented her woeful destiny, and he wondered what would become of her. Where would she go once she was left on her own, with neither husband nor parents to look after her? He spoke to his sons of the grief and worry that preoccupied his thoughts. A man's lifespan is limited, and no matter how much he might wish it otherwise, there is no way to halt the passing of time. If only my spirit could be left behind to help her. I'm not even sure about the intentions of my own sons. In the end, he died without knowing for sure that his wishes would be carried out. For a time, his sons treated her kindly, in keeping with his final wishes. But as things turned out, their feelings were superficial, and she endured many bitter experiences. Knowing this was the way of the world, she spent her life grieving over the hardships brought on by her uncertain fate. The only son who was inclined to treat her with any tenderness was the governor of Kawachi. He'd been attracted to her for many years. I was deeply moved by my father's last words, he told her. So please, speak to me without reserve, though I know I do not count as a person of significance. He flattered and cajoled her, making advances that exposed his shockingly base intentions. Facing such misfortune, she privately came to the realization that if she were to go on living much longer under these dreadful circumstances, rumors that she was involved in a vile relationship would spread eventually. Thus, without saying one word to anyone at all, she became a nun. Her ladies-in-waiting were upset that she took such an irrevocable action. The governor of Kawachi was also extremely resentful. You may have considered me hateful, wanted to avoid me, but since you have many years ahead of you, how, pray tell, will you get by? I have heard that he acquired a reputation as a pompous fool who meddled in things that were none of his business.